I am a haunted house actor. For those of you unaware of what that means, if you've ever been to your local seasonal haunted attraction in October, perhaps put on by a high school or a Kiwanis, a 4 H club, or a professional business, I am one of the people who jump out at you and go, boo! Well, not boo per se, since boo in our industry is considered taboo. But it is my job for that 25 to 30 minutes you're in our house to fully immerse you and make you believe that monsters are real. And in my years of haunting, there's one thing that I have learned, that there is usually at least one person in the group who truly believes that their haunted house is, in fact, truly haunted. I get asked all the time if I've ever witnessed or experienced any paranormal happenings at the haunt. Not once have I ever experienced anything I would consider remotely paranormal for any of the haunts I've worked at in my decade plus of haunt acting. No orbs, no manifestations, no objects mysteriously moving, no sudden drops in temperature, nothing out of the ordinary. I've come to my own personal conclusion that there is no such thing as ghosts. I'm a skeptic, to be sure, but that's not to say I don't believe in the possibility of ghosts being able to exist. If you look at it from a scientific standpoint, or metascience, parascience, is that a thing? Or perhaps pseudoscience. Either way, let me explain. If we go on the premise that everything gives off energy, or life force, whatever you want to call it, then where does that energy go when the creature ceases to exist? Is it transformed into another form of energy? Does it dissipate? Does it just remain out there, stagnant, waiting for a catalyst to rejuvenate it? Scientists have studied energy transformations and tried to build a better mousetrap to determine what happens to this energy. I'm of the opinion that the energy is still out there. You can't see it, but just like your gut telling you something is off when you walk into a bad situation, if you're sensitive enough, maybe you can feel it. So it's there. Now, if we take Einstein's theory, E equals mc squared, energy is equal to mass times the speed of light squared, then it's possible that this residual energy just floating out there can't be seen because it has no mass. But if there was a way to slow it down so that it becomes part of the visible spectrum, then it would appear in roughly whatever shape it held in life, right? So really, a ghost is nothing more than a unique energy signature that's moving too quickly for the human eye to see, or at the very least, not moving cohesively enough to give it a visual mass in the spectrum. Like gas, you can't see it, but you know it's there. So whether my theory is full of shit or not, there's only ever been one instance in my life which I would consider paranormal, simply by the mere fact I cannot explain it any other way. This happened at Waverly Hills Sanitarium in Louisville, Kentucky. My boss and the owner of the haunt I worked for, Kelly, was also in charge of coordinating the Midwest Haunters Convention pre-convention bus tour, which included several haunts within the surrounding area of Columbus. This year, the tour would take us to Louisville, which has several haunts within proximity of each other, including Waverly Hills. As a bonus, I and several of my haunt family got to ride down to Louisville in January with Kelly to go tour the haunts firsthand to see which would be willing to open out of season for the convention. Waverly Hills was our last stop. This process was time consuming, as you can imagine, with 7 or so haunts on the list to visit, and along with some sightseeing around Louisville, we were late getting into Waverly. It was about 11:30 at night by the time we pulled up in front of this historic building. And it being January, it was almost unbearably cold. So we were all bundled in our winter jackets while we waited in the gift shop for the owner to come meet us. While Kelly and the owner of the landmark, Tina, talked about their business, the rest of us were given free rein to tour the grounds as much as we wanted. Our group consisted of me, an actor trainer, Doug, our lead ringmaster clown Barnabas, our audio and visual expert Marco, and a paranormal investigator enthusiast Harry, all top-notch actors, all with their own set of skills that every haunt would want to work for them. To wit, the kind of guys you'd want on your team. If you're unfamiliar with Waverly Hills, it functioned as a hospital in the early 1900s for people suffering from tuberculosis. They did not know much about how to treat tuberculosis at the time. They thought exposure to open air to promote fresh oxygen intake would benefit the patients. So, a good majority of the building is large spaces open to the outside. We traversed that building from bottom to top with no supervision, no security guards, no one to tell us where we couldn't go. If it wasn't locked or barricaded, we went in it. We explored for quite some time. I mostly walked around on my own, but Harry and Marco and Doug did their paranormal experiments by calling out to whatever spirits may be present, checking their equipment for readings. I didn't pay much attention. I enjoyed the solitude, the quiet peace of it all. Yet there was one place we all wanted to go that was locked up. It was called the Body Chute. We had to wait for Kelly and Tina to finish their discussion before we were allowed to enter it. The Body Chute is the most unique aspect of the place. Back when the sanatorium was operational, it existed as a means of transporting expired patients out of the hospital unobserved by the other patients. It was believed that if the surviving patients were to see their fellow patients being carried out, it would be bad for morale, that they would lose hope. Therefore, when a patient died, the body would be taken out at night through the Body Chute, which ran through the mountain to the other side, where it would be loaded into a vehicle and transported for burial or whatever the family decided should happen to the body. For this reason, the Body Chute came to be known as the most haunted part of Waverly Hills, that it was a spot where most spirits lingered, not willing to move on to the other side. Remember, I don't believe in ghosts, just the possibility of ghosts, but the Body Chute made me question that belief that night. The Body Chute runs about a quarter of a mile long. It is a straight shot, gradual descent to the other side of the mountain. Half the trek is smooth, flat surface for the gurneys to roll down, and the other half are steps for the humans guiding the gurneys. There's no lighting, or rather, there was at one time, but it is no longer in use. You would need a flashlight or some other method of illumination to see. Otherwise, it's very close to pitch black inside. After Tina and Kelly had rejoined us, Tina unlocked the door at the top and let us all inside. She said we could walk down to the bottom. I didn't wait for an invitation and immediately set off with my hands in my pockets for warmth. As cold as it was outside in the January air, it was much colder inside the tunnel with its stagnant air and little ventilation. I was followed by Marco, then Harry, then Doug. Tina had a flashlight with her at the top of the tunnel, and it was enough to cast an ambient glow for a short distance, but eventually they faded out of sight as we entered the blackness. Harry, however, had his ghost gadget out, doing whatever it did, but the light from it was enough that I could see by, as my eyes had already adjusted to the dark. That's when shit got weird. About 3/4 of the way down, Harry shouted, "Guys, something just touched my back." Doug, who was walking behind him, said, "I'm right behind you, Harry. It wasn't me. There's nothing here." I think that's the point Marco pulled out his cell phone to activate his flashlight. Visually, there was nothing there, but there was something there. As the flashlight panned the small space, that's when I saw it, but only for an instant. The end of the tunnel was in sight, and I could see the door at the bottom was open. Standing in front of it was a very dark shadow. It had a humanoid figure and 2 pinpricks of glowing orbs where its eyes would be. In that moment, a cold, stronger than the outside temperature, shot through me, causing instantaneous goosebumps. I shivered as I exhaled visible breaths, my eyes wide as I felt the shadow looking directly at me. I wish I could say the cliche, I was frozen in shock, but something compelled me to move forward, closer to the shadow, as if beckoning me. I could say my heart was racing, or I stood there in fright, but truthfully, I don't know. Nothing else in the tunnel seemed to exist at that moment except for me, the shadow figure, and the open door, waiting for me to step through it. I continued walking slowly toward the shadow, unable to control myself. I was caught in its embrace, and it was pulling me in, not even against my will. I had no will, just the all-consuming urge to want to find out what lied beyond that open door. I was alone in the tunnel. Marco, Harry, Doug, they all disappeared. It was the quiet solitude I had always been looking for. Not a feeling of loneliness, just embracing the comfort of being alone. The shadow offered me that. It was compelling. While there were no audible words, no voice in the back of my mind, I knew all I had to do was step through the door, and I would have it. I would like to use another cliche and say the moment seemed to stretch on forever, but it didn't. In the second swing of Marco's phone's flashlight, the shadow receded just as quickly, disappearing through the open door. My eyes focused back in, and I saw the three guys staring at me. Ron, are you okay? It took me a second to find my voice. Did you see that? I asked, not even sure now what it was I saw. See what? Doug replied. The shadow, the door. The door was open. We looked at the door. The door was not open. In fact, the door was barricaded by a large metal bar across it so that it couldn't be opened. There was plastic hung in front of it, which, other than some minor rips, was undisturbed. I don't know what you saw, but it's not open now, Doug said. This place is weirding me out, I said. I'm going back up. I began walking again, this time up the chute. The guys followed behind. They chattered amongst themselves, but I paid no attention. My mind was still fixated on the shadow and that lingering feeling that the open door had given me. The walk back up to the top of the chute was uneventful. Kelly and Tina were still waiting by the entrance. Where did you guys go? Asked Kelly. What do you mean? Asked Harry. Kelly said, I could see you part of the way down. Then it was like a shadow passed in front of you, and I could no longer see you. Again, I felt goosebumps, but I said nothing. Well, Marco had his flashlight on, said Doug. You should have been able to see us the whole time. Ron said the door was open when he got down there, said Marco. That door is not open, said Tina. That door hasn't been opened in probably 30 years, maybe longer. I don't know what I saw, was all I said in response. Well, there is something here, said Tina. That was the shadow. Other people have reported seeing it or something like it. I've been here long enough. I've seen it a few times myself. Now I don't think about it much. It's just part of the job. Fortunately, Kelly, being the rational mind, broke the jittery anxiety I think was building up in the four of us. I'm cold. It's after 3 a.m., and we need to get back on the road. He turned to head out of the body chute, and Tina followed suit. Harry wasn't quite done yet. He pulled out his ghost gadget and said, This is a spectrometer. It has 3 colored lights on it, white, yellow, and red. It'll blink yellow if there's anything near, and red if something is present. We can use it to communicate. He set the device on the ground, and we stood around it. Is there anyone here? Harry said loudly. We watched the lights. They flickered between white and yellow. Did you die here? Asked Doug. The light flickered between yellow and red this time. This brought a jolt to the group, and we looked around at each other. Marco spoke up. If you want us to leave, turn all the lights off. And just like that, right on cue, all the lights on the gadget blinked out. Again, the goosebumps, except this time, I don't think I was the only one feeling them. That's enough for me, I said. I can take a hint. I turned and promptly hoofed it out the door back into the January chill. It did not take long for the rest of the guys to follow me. I think at that point we were of the same mind. It was time to go. We said our goodbyes to Tina and thanked her appreciatively for letting us tour the place so late. Once piled back into the car, Kelly steered us back onto the road leading away from the sanatorium. The rest of the guys were all chattering back and forth about what they had seen or experienced and talking about what had just happened with the ghost gadget and the body chute when Harry said, Guys, my back is burning. He was wearing a thick Green Bay Packers jacket and maneuvered himself to pull it off. Marco, can you see if there's anything on my back? Harry lifted his shirt, and there, in brilliant display, was a bright red hand mark contrasting against Harry's pale skin. The shape of the fingers was lengthened like something had clawed Harry down his back. The print was slightly swollen. Yo, holy shit, exclaimed Marco. What is it? Asked Harry, now alarmed. Dude, you've got this massive handprint all over your back, said Doug. Let me take a picture, said Marco, pulling out his phone. He snapped a shot, then handed the phone to Harry. What the fuck, said Harry. He pulled his shirt back down and tried to sit back into the passenger seat. He passed the phone around to everyone to see. I can't explain the handprint, and I wish I could say I had proof that the door was open when I got to the bottom of the chute, but I can't. However, the picture of Harry's back was not the only proof that came out of that night. We had all posted photos of our trip to our Facebook pages. One of mine was a picture from the top of the body chute that had been taken with the flash on the camera. Otherwise, it would have been too dark to see anything. As you can expect, the photo was grainy for being so low light. I thought nothing of it, but after I told my story, Case, one of the airbrush artists and prop designers that also worked for our haunt, reposted it, but zoomed in and enhanced. I don't know, Ron, Spo said. Once I blew it up, I saw this. The picture was dithered, as some digital photos tend to be, if not taken in a high-resolution format, But there, among the pixelation, was a solid black shape, slightly standing out from the dithering. It was humanoid, and there, set up against the blackness, were two glowing pixels where the eyes should have been. I don't know if it was Photoshop trickery, but I doubt it. Maybe like those haunters who so strongly want to believe that their haunt they work for is truly haunted, I wanted to believe that there truly was a shadow man at the end of the body chute and that the door was open. Unfortunately, the shadow figure in the picture obscured the door behind it. It was too hard to discern if it was open or closed. I still stand by what I saw. The door was open. As I said, I can't explain any of this away. My skepticism was rocked that night, and perhaps that is why the experience happened to me and none of the others. They were too willing to believe. For them, it wouldn't have been so monumental. It wouldn't have shaken their core beliefs. They would have been ecstatic if something like that happened to them. I, on the other hand, being a skeptic, am now stuck with that experience for as long as I live, not knowing how to rationalize the overwhelming desire I had to want to step through that door. I don't know what would have happened if I had. Would I have disappeared? Would I have died? They'd be carrying me out of the body chute, notifying my parents of their loss. That's hard to think about. As for the mark on Harry's back, I firmly believe that was a warning, because he was the biggest believer in the group, the one trying to find proof. He would likely have been the one to bring the unwanted attention to the spirits that roamed the place, disrupting the peace. After feeling what I felt toward the open door, I can understand that. The shadow was warning him to leave well enough alone. Thankfully, he did. I've been back to Waverly Hills several times since then. Tina did open it up for the Midwest Haunters tour, but the tour was in the daylight. There were close to 300 people across 4 buses on the tour, and as they scattered around the grounds taking their own pictures, I walked, mostly by myself, enjoying the sunshine, the warmth, and the not darkness. As usual, I was wrapped up in my quiet solitude. Tina did open the body chute for the haunters and other public tourists to explore that day, but me, I stayed away from it. I never went back down the body chute again.